genocide.
Well, on this show, we're going to look at the relationship the international community has with Libya, and I'll get into that in a moment. But I want to welcome in Sir Richard Dalton. Glad you could join us, sir. And I know you believe it's going to take a long time to resolve this particular conflict, don't you? Why is that?
Well, first I have to say that your allegation that Britain has blood on its hands is totally false. There's no question of Britain having blood on its hands, no more than any other country outside Libya might have blood on its hands in respect to the deaths in Egypt or in Tunisia. Yes, this may take time to settle, and I think the international community, starting with the Security Council today, has got to deliver much clearer messages. First, that the Libyan authorities will be held accountable for what they do to their people. I don't believe you can substantiate an allegation of genocide. You can certainly substantiate an allegation of grossly excessive use of force. But I think also the message has to be that the international community expects there to be a political channel to deal with these issues. Clearly, the opposition, which has every right to demonstrate and every right to make its views clear, has got to get together and organize so that there is a clear channel either for the international community to deal with or for any successor authority in Libya. At the moment, we see a chaotic situation. There are obligations both on the regime and on the people who want to see a better life for the people of Libya.
Well, Sir Richard, yeah, I should point out, by the way, it's not an allegation that Britain does have blood on its hands. It's just merely a question to get the debate going. But I appreciate your comment. I want to put an email question to you, if I may, sir, that came in from Ethiopia, from a viewer by the name of Guled Kasawe in Jijiga, who wrote in saying, Western nations have shown great disrespect for the democratic values that people in the Middle East are struggling to achieve. I'm skeptical of the Europeans' delayed response to Mubarak's deadly crackdown and their quick criticism of Muammar Gaddafi. I mean, I wonder, from your perspective, to what degree has there been a lack of consistency in the way the international community has dealt with the various uprisings that have been taking place in this sort of domino effect throughout the Middle East?
I think if you look at every single document about policy towards the region for many years now, you will find it quite clear that we expected the rulers to improve the human rights performance, to improve their performance under civil and political rights too. Obviously, there are major interests at play here, and it is not an immoral thing for countries to act in accordance with their interests. For example, in dealing with Libya on the matter of oil, given the need for European energy security to keep our industries going. It's absolutely plain that in our dealings with Libya, we expressed our dissatisfaction with the many aspects of the way in which Libya was conducting its affairs. And I think the long history of the improvement in Libya's relations with the international community, based on work against terrorism, work to eliminate weapons of mass destruction, work on development in Africa, it hasn't gone perfectly, but it has been a substantial improvement on the way Libya was behaving in the 70s and 80s, both for the interests of the Libyan people and for the interests of the region. And those positive aspects shouldn't be neglected.
All right, so I'll get back to you in just a moment. Let me bring in Hafid al-Ghwail again here, and I just ask what you expect to happen now. I mean, further confrontation, is that the likely scenario, and how real are the fears that Muammar Gaddafi's threat to sort of kill as many people as need be is going to be enacted?
If I may, just for a second, I find it really quite disrespectful for people in the West to tell us that what they have done with Gaddafi over the last few years is in the benefit of the Libyan people. It is nonsense. I mean, this is Britain, the United States, and others are exactly doing. It's the same example as giving a gun to a deranged lunatic who's holding his family hostage in a house. And then when he shoots them, they all stand out and say, well, we're not responsible for it. But anyway, for your own point, I think it is dangerous. And I think the reason why it is dangerous is because the international community is allowing this guy to continue to push the situation to a catastrophic end. And I think that's where the urgency of trying to contain him in some way is really the critical factor here in whether this country will slide towards chaos or whether we will have some form of a peaceful transition and a protection of the lives of the Libyans. So these are fluid situations, but if you allow this man to start killing his own people this way, while watching him on television, while he is trying to justify it in the guise of Tiananmen Square scenario or the Russian Revolution scenarios, as he said in his speech, we are looking at a really serious situation.
On the issue you raised, I want to get to Mr. Ibrahim Saad, the question that came in from a viewer in Canada, if I may, please, sir. This came in from Sumaya Virji, who wrote in from Quebec, saying, the arms agreement several years ago between Blair and Gaddafi implies that British weaponry is being used against the Libyan people. Cameron's public condemnation of these violent attacks is an attempt to quash any accusations of British complicity. And I know that Monarish Maui, the legal advisor to the UN High Commission on Human Rights, has said there's now a real question mark over arms sales to the Libyan regime, saying that, you know, if these weapons were used, were British weapons that killed more than 300 people, there may be a backlash now. And I wonder what sort of backlash you might think there might be.
Well, first of all, we all agree that any country would seek its own interests. But if I understood Sir Richard about his indication, I'm afraid that to say that the interest of the Britain and the West go against the interest of the Libyan people by having dignified life, by living under human rights respect, by living in democracy, by getting rid of a tyrant like Gaddafi. I mean, this is very important, and I think in the long run that will affect the relation between Libya and other countries, between the Libyan people, how Libyan people look to the West. I'd like just to mention that Libyans went into alliance with the British during World War II, and we have a very good relation with Britain. But when we see weapons, British weapons, used by Gaddafi against our own people, when we see Prime Minister Tony Blair hugging Gaddafi, a murderer, a certified terrorist, then this should be put under investigation.
I want to give Sir Richard a chance to answer some of the comments that we've made here in the studio in DC. Sir Richard, also a question, if I may, as you answer that, that came in from a viewer from California, from the USA. Sima Obeid wrote in saying, human rights abuses are the first concern of Western nations when they're domestic. However, when there are abuses in the Middle East and North Africa region, the West cares only for their self-interests. And I wonder, you know, if the West has preached that there should be democratic rule, or, you know, and that's been a message often used as a pretext to take military action in parts of the world. I wonder why that, you know, these long-standing regimes such as Egypt and Tunisia and Libya have been tolerated so long, sir.
Well, I believe many of the people who've spoken wouldn't wish there to be wholesale re-establishment of the colonial order in which foreigners make and unmake governments. I haven't heard a single practical suggestion from your other two guests as to how we, or anybody else, should bring about the end of the Gaddafi regime. I made a practical proposal, which is to send a strong political message through the Security Council that Colonel Gaddafi will be held accountable and his regime will be held accountable. And perhaps the other speakers could suggest what should be done rather than bewailing the situation. Obviously, we are at one, all three of us, in thinking that what has